Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Cassie Viela, and I'm a realtor, property manager, and investor here in San Antonio, Texas. On my channel, we talk about all things real estate, from data and investing to home and garden. So if that's your cup of tea, like, subscribe, follow. I'm on all social media channels as Cassie Viela. I thought we would start doing a series because I absolutely love to read. I read constantly. I mix it up. I read a lot of different types of books, but obviously because of the field that I work in, I read a lot of books on real estate. That's actually how I got into real estate, was I read some books on real estate, like pretty much everybody else, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, those types of books. Kind of got me started on this path. And so I love these books, and I also really enjoy watching book reviews. So I thought, you know what, I can do some book reviews on these real estate books. And so I thought I would start with my personal favorite. I love Brandon Turner and Heather Turner's book on managing rental properties. This is published through Bigger Pockets. Obviously, I love Bigger Pockets. If you're an investor and you're not on Bigger Pockets, like, I don't know what you're doing with your life. They are awesome. The podcasts, the forums, just so many resources. I absolutely love that company, and this book is fantastic. One of my gripes with a lot of real estate books is that they are sort of a lot of theory, but very little practice. So I was reading all these books, and they might say something like, oh, if you're going to be a good investor, you got to treat it like a business, not a hobby. And like, that's it. Then I'm like, well, how, what's the difference? What does it look like if I'm treating it like a business? Or, all of these, like, oh, you gotta, cash flow is king, but what does cash flow look like exactly? How do I calculate that? And I think Bigger Pockets does a really good job of going down to the nuts and bolts of how to do things. And this book definitely does that. So I read this book after we bought our first rental property. And I literally the way the book is laid out, I think is really wonderful because it takes you step by step through the process. So, you'll start out, advertise your rental property, how to create a lease, how to screen a tenant, what the application process looks like. All like step by step. So when I was doing that for the first time, I was not a realtor yet. It was not in property management. I was just like a property manager of my one rental property that we had just bought. So I bought this book, and I just literally followed the steps exactly as they were laid out. I didn't even read ahead. I was like, oh, okay, I advertised it and I had an application. Let me read what I have to do next, But there's so many tips, and like I highlighted this book so much because I just found it extremely helpful. Because of this book, when I was managing my very first tenant, I looked way more professional than I had any business looking. Like, I was able to do it in such a way that it seemed like I knew what I was doing, which is pretty important, I would say, when you're managing a property. You definitely want the tenants to think that you know what you're doing. This book helped me do that. Another thing I really, really like about this book is that it comes with some forms. So it comes with a whole zip file of pretty much every form you'll need except the lease. The leases are very state specific, so that's not part of it. Even though it does have a chapter on like how to craft the lease and what's important about the lease and what things you need to make sure it includes. But it does have all of the other documents. It has like the move-in, move-out condition report. It has the pet agreement. It has a deposit to hold agreement. It has the breakdown of the deposit return. It just has a lot of really good forms. Rules and regulations are really good, except I did have to remove one. I'm sorry, Heather Turner, but I had to remove the gun one because I'm in Texas and most of my clients are military. So they did have a rule in there about not allowing firearms, and I was like, that's that's not going to fly here in San Antonio. So, but you can customize the forms, obviously. But it's nice to just have a starting off point, especially when you're brand new and you're like completely overwhelmed. It's a lot. The process is a lot at one time. So having the forms, having kind of like the book holding your hand every step along the way, I felt was extremely helpful. So if you are a first-time landlord, or if you're new to this, if you're going to self-manage, then I definitely would get this book, follow it through. Even now that I'm a property manager, a lot, even reading it with my property manager realtor lens, it does give a lot of good advice. It really does. I also really appreciate that before it gets into, here's how to advertise the property, here's how to screen tenants and everything. It really does talk about being a fair landlord. It talks about taking pride in what you do, taking pride in your properties, and being a good business person. And it has a whole chapter about fair housing, which is extremely important. The penalties for breaking fair housing laws are very, very strict. And you just, for the ethics and integrity of it, you want to follow the fair housing rules. So it gives I feel like that's probably the chapter that I highlighted the most, because I hadn't taken my realtor classes at that point, and which, half of those are about fair housing. So this book really helped me understand, because there are things you could do that you could do them not even having the intention to discriminate, but they could be interpreted as discrimination. And so it gives you some examples. For example, children and family size is a protected class. So you can't ask somebody about their kids, but that's something I would always normally do. Like, oh, do you have any kids? If I ask that of a tenant that's looking at the property, I could be breaking a fair housing rule. So it goes into those kind of details in this book. So definitely recommend this book. It is for after you've already acquired the property and you're trying to self-manage. And I would keep this on hand. Even if you hire a property manager, I feel like this would be helpful, because if there's ever something that your property manager is doing that you don't understand, you could look at the chapter in this book and kind of try to understand maybe why they might have to do it that way, or why it might make sense for them to do it that way. Or you might disagree and say, like, this book says you shouldn't do that, and I want to try it this way. So I think it's just a really valuable resource. I'm really thankful that I had this when I first started out. I'm very thankful for the forms, most of all, because they're just really well made. They're really well made. They're very customizable. I made a little logo in paint and put it at the top. And it looks like, obviously the logo is in paint, so it didn't look like a super professional company, but definitely looked more professional than I just bought a house and I have no idea what I'm doing. Get this book if you are a new landlord. Definitely highly recommend. This is all practice and practical tips, a little bit of theory, but mostly very, very practical. I hope that was helpful. If you have any other books that you would recommend to me that I can read and review, definitely comment down below. I would love to do that. Like I said, I love reading, and I want to know if there's something I've missed out on that's really, really good. Let me know.